Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Special Projects custom build. And like the Mercedes C63 Evo, which we did on Tuesday, this is another custom, a vehicle which I think is believable as far as happening in real life, but as it happens so far, it hasn't. This is not a real car, but it is a car which I've tried to base on elements of reality, things that have already happened, cars that do already exist, and taking some liberties with the tuning in the game to create a fictional race car. And of course, Polyphony themselves set a precedent for that by having so many LM versions of road cars, some of which are inspired by or ape actual race cars, like the Corvette C6R mules, if you will, that are called the LM race car. Others are totally fictional, like the Mazda RX-8 LM race car. Now this vehicle is what I envision to be in a similar style to things like Aston Martin's Nürburgring Racing, or N24 Rapide, which was a hydrogen vehicle, a hybrid race car, and it was closer to being kind of a production spec race car. It didn't have a big crazy wing or a body kit or anything like that. That's kind of the style that I wanted to go with for this car. Not necessarily an insane amount of power or even necessarily designed to win the race, but just entering to make a point. The Fisker Karma is obviously the vehicle. I'm a huge fan of this car. I know a lot of people aren't. And as far as the visual upgrades, I've gone pretty heavy on it. Now, we don't really need to go over to the visual tuning garage because there aren't that many options to go through, so it's fairly simple to do. I've gone for the carbon fibre body kit, the flat floor, partially for the visuals and also partially for the handling. We've gone for BBS rims. They're only available in one size, so you don't need to worry about that. And as you can see, we've fitted a race number, obviously, whichever number you want. Now, as far as the colour, I've gone for ebony black for both the rims and the brakes. That comes from the Jaguar S-Type. And for the colour of the body, that one's a bit trickier, because of course it's not a real car, so you can go for whatever colour you want, but I've gone for, of course, blue, and it's one of the GT original colours. It's under the pearlescent section. It's called GT Japanese number 6C. It's a very strong, bright blue, but if you can't have access to that, which I think is probably from a seasonal event or something like that, then of course you could go for something like French racing blue instead, or LM blue in the style of the Nissan R33 Skyline, that kind of thing, or obviously a totally different colour entirely. So that's it really for the visuals, fairly simple as I said. So next we'll go over to, of course, the mechanical side of things for the tune setup, and we'll finally take it out to, appropriately of course, the Nürburgring to test the car. Now, when it comes to tuning vehicles which are hybrids or electric cars like the Fisker, the Tesla, that kind of thing, there isn't a huge amount that you're allowed to do to them, especially in the way of power. That's a shame, because those cars have a lot of untapped potential which Gran Turismo just doesn't allow us to go into at the moment, and that is a shame, especially for fans of alternative technology vehicles such as myself, and I know some of you guys are as well. Now, I've gone for racing hards, because although you could say that's kind of overkill for a car with this kind of power and performance, we are building a race car, in effect, so I wanted it to feel authentic, and of course to be quick around a track. We've gone for racing brakes as well for the exact same reason. As far as suspension, I've lowered the ride height to 90mm front and rear, so it is lower. You do lower that centre of gravity, but at the same time you don't want the car to be necessarily slammed to the floor, because that looks kind of weird. As far as the springs, we've increased those a fair bit, up to 1375 and 1625, the dampers to 5, anti-roll to 4. I've gone for neutral camber and tow, and the reason why is because although yes, it is rear engine, rear wheel drive, you could justifiably make an argument for having a bit of camber in particular, and I did think about it, but the reason why I opted not to is because at the end of the day it's a big, long, wide, very heavy vehicle, and you need as much manoeuvrability as you can get. So if you want some camber, by all means go for it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend having it because you don't really need it that much. It's not really fast enough to justify it, at least for me. Now, you cannot modify or tune the gearbox, unfortunately, and that really is a shame, because if you could change the final drive on this car, You could potentially give it much better top-end performance, because that's the biggest downside of the current electric cars on Gran Turismo. Likewise with the diff, unfortunately you cannot tune that. Thankfully the handling is pretty good anyway though. Now as far as the power, I have reduced it, and this is totally down to you what kind of PP level or racing level you want to have it at. I wanted to have it at 500 PP so that it could be used for racing if you wanted to. Although obviously most people won't. So I've reduced the power down to 305 horsepower, and as far as the weight, we have dropped the car's weight by over 600 kilos, well over half a ton. I have actually given it a little bit of ballast, just 12 kilos, which I've put all the way to the front of the car, and the reason for that is again to round it off to 500 pp and to allow it to have a little bit more power as well. We've got the maximum downforce on the optional lip wing. You could of course fit a bigger wing if you wanted to. I wanted to go a little bit more subtle, again like the Aston Martin Rapide Nürburgring race car. So that's it for the tune. There's definitely room for variation there, especially with regard to, in particular, the power. You could change it around a huge amount and change the PP level wildly. You can easily go above 530 thanks to the flat floor. So that's it for the tune. Now let's take it out to the track to actually see what it can do. Now, in a similar vein to some of the other, not just custom, but also replica tunes that we've done in special projects in the past, a perfect example being my replica of the Mini Marcos race car that ran in the Le Mans back in the day. This is a similar kind of tune that, although sounds really cool and really fun as a concept, what's not to like about a Fisker Karma race car, the reality, just like with the Mini Marcos Le Mans car, is that it's not necessarily the most useful of cars to actually race with. Now that being said, it definitely has its uses. I personally use the Fisker Karma a lot for 500 pp seasonal events. It can easily win against the computer even on the expert level events. I won the current one in the rain easily with the Fisker Karma, so it definitely has the potential to win. So if you want to use it for that, you can. Against real people though, especially on tracks like the Nürburgring, ironically enough, where you do need a bit of top speed at least, it's not as strong. So it's more for the fun, but it can be used for competition under certain circumstances, such as seasonals, as I said. So if you decide to build this tune or a variation of it, obviously I hope you find it fun and potentially useful as well. But that's it overall for this build. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.